I always believed weddings were supposed to be about joy, about love, about two families joining together under a veil of laughter, music, and celebration. I pictured it since I was a kid, walking down the aisle, the nervous smile of the person waiting for me at the altar, the proud tears in my parents' eyes, and the clinking of champagne glasses later as everyone toasted to a new beginning. But nothing could have prepared me for the fact that the person who nearly destroyed it all wasn't a stranger, wasn't some jealous ex, but my own brother. I'll never forget the first sign of it, the way Daniel looked at me on the morning of my wedding day. I was standing in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of my suit, hands trembling just slightly from excitement and nerves, when he walked into the room. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't laughing like he usually did. His eyes lingered on me, sharp, calculating, and filled with something I couldn't name at the time. "Big day," he muttered, leaning against the doorframe. "Yeah," I said with a shaky laugh, "biggest day of my life." He smirked, but it wasn't the warm, brotherly smirk I knew. It was something else, something darker. "Enjoy it while it lasts." At the time, I brushed it off as nerves. Daniel always had a strange way of joking, and I thought maybe he was just anxious. But I should have paid more attention. I should have recognized the venom in his voice. The ceremony began beautifully. The church was filled with roses, the air smelled faintly of lavender, and sunlight streamed through the stained glass, painting the pews in soft shades of red and gold. When my bride walked down the aisle, her dress flowing like a river of silk, I swore my heart nearly stopped. I was lost in her smile, in the sound of the music, in the whispers of the guests. Until I saw Daniel. He was sitting in the second row, leaning forward, his phone in his hand. He wasn't watching the ceremony. He wasn't even pretending to smile. He was texting. His fingers moved furiously across the screen, his jaw tight. My stomach twisted, but I tried to ignore it. That was my mistake. When the priest asked if anyone had reason to object, the silence was broken. Not by laughter, not by the cough of some old relative, but by Daniel's voice. "I do." The words cut through the air like a blade. My heart stopped. Everyone turned to face him. My bride froze, her lips parting in shock. Daniel stood slowly, adjusting his suit jacket as if he had been preparing for this very moment. His face was calm, almost too calm, and his eyes were locked on mine with a look I will never forget. Triumph. "I object," he repeated, his voice echoing in the church. "Because the groom has been lying, and everyone here deserves to know the truth before he ruins her life." Gasps filled the air. My mother clutched her chest. My bride's father's face turned crimson with rage. "What are you doing?" I hissed, my throat dry, my vision spinning. Daniel smirked again, and this time I recognized it fully. It was the smirk of a man who wanted to watch the world burn. "You didn't tell her everything, did you, brother? You didn't tell her about Sarah." The name hit me like a hammer. Sarah, my ex, my past, something I had buried years ago. My bride turned to me, her eyes wide, searching my face for answers. Whispers exploded through the crowd. My knees merely buckled as I tried to study myself. Daniel stepped forward, pulling out his phone, waving it in the air like a weapon. "You all want proof?" he said. "I've got messages, photos, evidence. He was with her just months ago, lying to all of us, lying to you." The church was chaos now. My bride's face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. "No," I said, my voice shaking. "It's not true."
I haven't seen Sarah in years." But Daniel didn't stop. He started reading out loud fabricated messages, his phone glowing in his hand. My guests shifted uncomfortably, their trust in me crumbling second by second. And in that moment, as I stood there, on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, I realized the truth. My own brother was trying to destroy me. Not because of Sarah, not because of any mistake I had made, but because he wanted to. Because he couldn't stand to see me happy. Because in Daniel's eyes, if he couldn't win, then I didn't deserve to either. And that was the moment I made a vow. Not to God, not to the priest, not even to my bride, but to myself. If Daniel wanted to ruin my life, then I would make sure to ruin his. And unlike him, I wouldn't strike half-prepared in a church. I would wait. I would plan. I would make sure when the day came, he would feel the same humiliation he had just inflicted on me. The day he walked down the aisle, I would be waiting.
The silence after Daniel's words was deafening, heavier than any sound I had ever known. My bride, my beautiful bride, was trembling beside me, her eyes glistening with tears that she tried desperately to blink away. The priest shifted awkwardly, caught between duty and the unfolding disaster. Guests exchanged horrified looks, whispers growing louder with every passing second. And Daniel? He stood tall, confident, victorious. I could see it in the way his chest rose, in the smug set of his jaw. He had planned this, every second of it. He had waited for the precise moment when I was most vulnerable, when all eyes were on me, and then he had cut me down. "Is it true?" my bride whispered, her voice cracking like shattered glass. "No," I said immediately, grabbing her hands. "You know me. I wouldn't—" But Daniel interrupted, his tone dripping with mock sympathy. "Oh, he'll deny it, of course. He always does. But I have proof." He raised his phone again, scrolling deliberately, as though searching for damning messages. Should I read them all out loud? Or maybe I should send them to her directly? The crowd gasped again, the tension stretching tighter and tighter, ready to snap. I wanted to rip that phone from his hand. I wanted to scream at him, to demand why he hated me enough to destroy the one day I dreamed about for years. But something stopped me, something cold, something terrifyingly clear. If I lashed out now, if I let anger take control, then I'd give him exactly what he wanted. So I swallowed it. The fury, the heartbreak, the humiliation. I'd buried it deep inside me like a hot coal. "Enough," the priest finally said, his voice firm. "This is not the place." But the ceremony was already broken. My bride stepped back from me, shaking her head. Her father moved to her side, glaring at me with eyes that burned with accusation. Guests stood, unsure if they should stay or leave. "Maybe we should postpone," my bride whispered. The words cut deeper than any blade. Postpone, which was the polite way of saying she didn't trust me anymore. Daniel smirked, satisfied, then sat back down in his pew like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just lit my entire world on fire. The wedding was over.
The days that followed were worse than any nightmare. Rumors spread like wildfire, through family, through friends, through social media. The story twisted, distorted, reshaped, until even people who hadn't been at the wedding had an opinion.
Some thought I was guilty. Others pitied me. But no one looked at me the same way again. And Daniel? He played the role of the concerned brother, pretending he hadn't meant to ruin everything, that he only wanted the truth to come out. He told people he was protecting my bride from a lifetime of regret. He painted himself as a hero. I didn't speak to him. I couldn't. If I did, I might not be able to stop myself from doing something irreversible. But in the quiet of my room, in the long nights where sleep refused to come, I planned. I replayed every second of the wedding in my mind. His smirk, his words, the way everyone looked at me afterward. And I made a promise to myself. I would not live as the man Daniel destroyed. I would not let him write the ending to my story. He thought he had won. But what he didn't know was that weddings don't happen just once in a lifetime. He had his own fiancée, his own engagement, his own day approaching. And when his time came, I would be there, waiting. It wasn't easy to rebuild my life after that. My bride and I drifted apart. How could we not? Trust, once broken, doesn't heal easily. She tried at first, tried to believe me when I told her Daniel was lying. But his poison had already seeped too deep. She called off the engagement within a month. The humiliation nearly broke me. My family tried to stay neutral, but I could see it in their eyes. Doubt. Even my parents, who had raised me, who knew me better than anyone, hesitated when I swore my innocence. Daniel was their son too, and he had been convincing. I was alone. And maybe that was what I needed, because solitude sharpens the mind. It clears the fog of heartbreak and forces you to see the world for what it is. Daniel wasn't just my brother. He was my enemy. And enemies don't deserve forgiveness. They deserve destruction. The first crack in Daniel's perfect facade appeared months later during his engagement party. I wasn't invited, of course, but news travels fast in families, especially ours. Photos were posted online. Daniel and his fiancée smiling, wrapped around each other like the perfect couple. Everyone congratulated him, praised him, said what a wonderful husband he would be. I laughed when I saw it. A bitter, hollow laugh. Because I knew the truth. I knew Daniel. And I knew that behind the polished smile and charming persona was the same man who had gutted me on my wedding day. So, I started digging. It began small. Social media, old friends, whispers from people who had crossed paths with him. And slowly, a picture began to form. Daniel wasn't as perfect as he pretended to be. He had secrets. He had enemies of his own. He had cracks in his armor. And if I played my cards right, I could use every single one of them. I remember staring at a photo of him and his fiancée, their fingers intertwined, their smiles radiant, and whispering to myself, "When your day comes, Daniel, I'll be the one holding the knife."
For weeks, I carried Daniel's betrayal like a scar across my chest. Every glance from a family member, every awkward silence when friends spoke about weddings, was another reminder of how deeply he had cut me. But scars can be useful. They don't just mark pain, they remind you what you survived. And I was done being the victim. If Daniel thought he had ended me, he was wrong. All he had done was awaken something I didn't know I had inside me. A coldness, a clarity, revenge. It began quietly, almost harmlessly. At night, while the world slept, I opened my laptop and started piecing together Daniel's life. His social media was spotless, curated, polished, the image of a perfect man. He posted photos with his fiancée, smiling vacations, dinner dates, motivational quotes, nothing incriminating, nothing real. But I knew Daniel better than anyone. He was a man of masks, and I'd lived with him long enough to know where the cracks usually formed. So I dug deeper. I searched old high school forums, university message boards, comments buried under years of digital dust. And slowly, patterns began to emerge. Mentions of Daniel at parties, whispers of debts unpaid, fights with teammates. Nothing solid, yet, but the shadows of something ugly. The real break came when I reached out to people from his past. Old acquaintances, friends who drifted away. Most were hesitant to talk, but bitterness lingers, and some people were all too eager to share. Daniel? Yeah, I knew him. He was charming, sure, but you couldn't trust him with anything. Borrowed money, never paid back, lied through his teeth. Another voice, an old coworker, was sharper. You're telling me he's engaged? Poor girl. He was sleeping around constantly back when we worked together. Smooth talker, but a snake. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. Daniel wasn't just flawed, he was rotten. The deeper I went, the darker it got. There was whispers of gambling, nights at underground poker tables, a few shady business deals with people you wouldn't want showing up at your door. But the crown jewel came by accident. One night, scrolling through tagged photos on social media, I stumbled across a picture. Daniel wasn't supposed to be in it. It was just a group shot at some bar. But there he was, in the corner of the frame, his arm wrapped around a woman who definitely wasn't his fiancée. My pulse quickened. I zoomed in. Her face was blurred by the low light, but the intimacy in his touch was unmistakable. I cross-referenced the date. That photo was taken just 3 weeks after he proposed. I had him.
I didn't stop there. I tracked down the woman. It wasn't easy, just a first name mentioned in a caption, a breadcrumb trail of tagged friends, but eventually I found her. We met in a cafe, neutral ground. She looked nervous, like she already knew talking to me was a mistake. "You're Daniel's brother?" she asked, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup. "Yes," I said, "and I think you know why I'm here." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she sighed, looking down at the table. "I didn't know he was engaged. He never told me. He said he was single." Her words were the final nail in his coffin. Not only was Daniel a liar, he was cheating on the very woman he was about to marry. And I would make sure everyone knew it. Walking home that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. The weight on my chest had lifted, replaced by a sharp, electric energy. I imagined Daniel's wedding day, the guests dressed in their finest, his fiancée glowing, the church filled with laughter and love. And then, the moment, the silence, my voice cutting through it just as his had cut through mine. I pictured his face crumbling, the whispers spreading, his fiancée's heart breaking in front of everyone he cared about. It would be perfect. No, better than perfect. Poetic. Because when Daniel's world came crashing down, when the mask was torn from his face, he would finally understand what he had done to me. And I would be there, watching, savoring every second. The hunt was over. Now it was time to set the trap. Revenge is not a blade you swing recklessly. It's a poison you drip slowly, drop by drop, until your target doesn't realize they're dying until it's already too late. That was the lesson I learned as I prepared to destroy Daniel. I had the proof, the photo, the woman who confessed she'd been with him during his engagement. It would have been easy to to show his fiancée everything right then, to shatter their relationship months before the wedding. But easy wasn't enough. I wanted Daniel to feel what I felt, to stand in front of the people he loved, to believe, if only for a moment, that he had won, that his future was secure, before I ripped it away. So I waited. And while I waited, I sharpened my weapons. The first step was gaining access to Daniel's circle again. After the disaster of my own wedding, we barely spoke. He avoided me when possible, but in public, he played the role of the forgiving brother. To outsiders, we looked like two men healing a rift. I encouraged the illusion. When our parents invited us both for dinner, I went. I smiled. I even congratulated him on his upcoming wedding, my voice steady, though every word tasted like ash. He looked suspicious at first, narrowing his eyes like he expected me to lash out. But when I didn't, when I simply nodded and toasted to his happiness, he relaxed. He thought I'd moved on. Good. That was exactly what I wanted him to think. His fiancée, Emily, was warm, kind-hearted, the type of woman who lit up every room she entered. It was almost painful knowing she was caught in his web of lies. Part of me wanted to pull her aside, to tell her the truth, to free her from him. But I resisted, because timing was everything. Still, I made sure to get close. I laughed at her jokes, asked about her work, complimented her whenever I could. She saw me as the quieter brother, the gentler one, a man wronged by circumstance but still capable of kindness. That trust would matter later. In the weeks leading to the wedding, Daniel grew busier. Rehearsals, fittings, meetings with planners. His guard slipped. He bragged openly about his new job, about the expensive honeymoon he was planning. And at night, when he thought no one was watching, he slipped back into old habits. I followed him once, not far, just enough to confirm what I already suspected. He left Emily's apartment, claiming he had work, and drove across town to a hotel. He wasn't alone. I didn't confront him, not even take photos. Not yet. Because the beauty of revenge is patience. And I wasn't just collecting evidence anymore. I was watching, studying, learning his patterns, like a hunter circling prey. The more time I spent around him, the more cracks I saw. His arrogance was growing. He believed he was untouchable, that he'd beaten me once and would always stay a step ahead. At dinner one night, when Emily excused herself to take a call, he leaned toward me, smirking. "Still sore about your wedding?" he whispered. My jaw clenched, but I forced a laugh. Ancient history. He studied me, eyes sharp, searching for anger. Finding none, he chuckled. "Good. Wouldn't want you to embarrass yourself again." It took every ounce of strength not to lunge across the table. But instead, I smiled, because I knew something he didn't. His reckoning was coming. The final piece of the setup came by chance. Emily invited me to help with decorations one weekend, while Daniel was busy with work. We sat surrounded by flowers, ribbons, and place cards, her excitement radiating as she talked about the big day. At one point, she sighed dreamily. "I just can't wait to see Daniel's face when I walk down the aisle. He's been so supportive, so perfect. I feel like the luckiest woman alive." The words twisted my stomach. Perfect, lucky, lies. But I kept my mask in place. "You deserve to be happy," I told her softly. She smiled, touching my hand. "You're sweet. I know things have been hard between you two, but I'm glad you're trying. Family is everything, right?" "Right," I said.
But in my mind, I added, family is everything until it isn't. That night, lying in bed, I went over the plan one last time. I wouldn't strike before the wedding. That would be too easy, too merciful. No, I would wait until the moment Daniel felt safest. When he stood at the altar, surrounded by everyone he cared about, believing he had triumphed, then, and only then, I would step forward, the same way he had on my wedding day. The storm was gathering, and Daniel had no idea he was standing in its path.
They say time heals all wounds. That's a lie. Time doesn't heal, it sharpens. Every day that passed after Daniel ruined my wedding didn't dull the pain, it honed it, like a blade dragged across stone, until it gleamed with deadly precision. The closer his wedding drew, the sharper that blade became. And I was ready to use it. The family had started treating Daniel's wedding like a holy event, as though it were destined to heal all the fractures between us. Our parents buzzed with excitement, relatives poured in from across the country, and every conversation at family dinners revolved around him. "The venue is just beautiful," my mother gushed one evening, her eyes shining. "Emily's family spared no expense. Oh, it'll be a day to remember." Yes, it would, but not for the reasons she thought. My father turned to me, his expression cautious. "You'll behave, won't you, for your brother's sake?" Behave. As though I were a child who couldn't be trusted not to throw a tantrum. I forced a smile. Of course. Inside, I laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how blind they were. How quickly they had forgotten the way Daniel humiliated me in front of them all. To them, the past was best buried. But to me, it was fuel. Daniel, meanwhile, basked in his victory. He was more arrogant than ever, strutting at family gatherings, boasting about his future, about the new house Emily's parents had helped them secure. One night, after a few too many drinks, he leaned across the table, grinning like the devil himself. "You know, little brother, maybe what happened at your wedding was for the best. Saved her from making a mistake, right? You should be thanking me." I gripped my glass so tightly I thought it would shatter. My pulse thundered in my ears. But I didn't let the mask slip. Instead, I smiled. "You're right. Maybe I should." His laughter echoed long after the dinner ended. And that's when I realized something important. Daniel wasn't just cruel. He was careless. He thought he had already won, which meant he'd never see me coming. In the weeks leading to his wedding, I became a ghost in his life. Not absent. Ghosts don't disappear completely. They linger. They watch. And I watched him closely. I saw the late-night texts he tried to hide from Emily. I noted the names of bars and hotels where he disappeared. I overheard hushed phone calls about debts that made his voice drop to a whisper. Every detail, every slip, I collected like jewels. Not to use all at once, but to have, ready, should the opportunity arise. Because revenge isn't just about striking back. It's about control. And by now, I controlled the board. Emily remained the tragic figure in all this. Sweet, naive Emily. She welcomed me with open arms every time we crossed paths, oblivious to the storm brewing around her. One evening, while helping with the seating chart, she confided in me. "I just hope Daniel isn't too stressed," she said, her brow furrowed. "He's been working so late lately. Sometimes I barely see him." I clenched my jaw. Working. That's what he told her. I said, "He's lucky to have you. Not many women would be so patient." She smiled softly.
Well, when you love someone, you trust them. Those words lodged in my chest like shards of glass, because trust was exactly what Daniel had shattered from me. And yet here she was, clinging to it with blind faith. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. But pity wouldn't stop me. Because the truth was, I wasn't just avenging myself anymore. I was avenging her, too. She just didn't know it yet. The night before the wedding, I stood by my window staring out at the darkened city. Somewhere across town, Daniel was probably laughing, drinking, celebrating his last night of freedom. He believed tomorrow would cement his victory, that he'd walk away with a wife, respect, and the adoration of everyone present. I whispered into the night, as though he could hear me. Tomorrow, brother, is the day I take everything from you. I closed my eyes and saw it all again. My ruined wedding, his smug face, the humiliation that haunted me. But this time, the vision didn't end with me broken. It ended with him shattered, utterly, completely destroyed. And I slept with a smile, because the blade was sharp, the trap was set, and tomorrow, Daniel would bleed.
Weddings smelled the same, no matter whose they are. Roses, perfume, wax candles, and the faint trace of nerves. As I walked into the church that morning, the memories hit me like a wave. My own wedding, how it looked, how it sounded, how Daniel's voice had cut through it like a knife. But this time was different. This time, I was the one holding the knife. The guests were buzzing, dressed in their finest. Emily floated through the crowd like an angel, glowing in white, her laughter tinkling like music. She greeted everyone with hugs and smiles, blissfully unaware of the truth coiled around her like a snake. And then there was Daniel, standing at the altar in his tailored suit, grinning like a man who thought he had already won. He looked invincible, untouchable. I almost laughed, because beneath that perfect image, I knew the truth. And in just a short while, so would everyone else. The ceremony began beautifully. The music swelled, the priest's voice rang out, and the guests leaned in, hanging on every word. I sat quietly in the second row, exactly where Daniel had sat during mine. I folded my hands, my face calm, my heart steady. No rushing, no shouting, no mistakes. This would be precise, surgical. When the priest reached the vows, Daniel took Emily's hands, gazing at her with counterfeit adoration. I promise to love you, to honor you, to remain faithful to you. The word faithful lodged in my throat like a splinter. I bit back a smile, because that was my cue. I rose slowly. My chair creaked, loud enough to draw eyes. Emily blinked in surprise. Daniel faltered mid-vow, his voice stuttering. And in that silence, I spoke. "Funny," I said softly, my voice carrying through the church, "how you promise fidelity when I know exactly where you were last weekend." The crowd stirred, heads turned, whispers erupted. Daniel's face drained of color. "Sit down," he hissed, his mask slipping for the first time. But I didn't. I stepped forward, my movements deliberate, like a surgeon approaching the operating table. "Do you want to tell her, Daniel?" I asked, my eyes locked on his. Emily's brow furrowed. "Daniel, what's he talking about?" Panic flickered across his face, and in that moment, I knew I had him. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My finger swiped once, twice, and then I held it up. On the screen was the photo, The one from the bar. Daniel's arm wrapped around another woman, his lips dangerously close to hers. Gasps filled the church. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Daniel lunged forward. "It's nothing, just an old picture. It doesn't mean anything." But I wasn't done. "Really?" I said, my tone calm, almost clinical. "Because I also spoke to her. She told me everything. How you promised her she wasn't engaged, how you spent nights in her bed while Emily was at home planning this day." Emily staggered back, her face pale, her eyes glistening with betrayal. "No," Daniel pleaded, turning to her. "He's lying. He's twisting things." "Lying?" I tilted my head. "Funny. That's exactly what you said at my wedding, remember? When you ruined me in front of everyone. You said you had proof. You paraded your lies like they were truth. But unlike you, Daniel, I don't lie." The church fell silent. Every eye was on him. Every whisper was about him. And Daniel, my proud, arrogant brother, was crumbling. The priest shifted uncomfortably, his face pale. Emily's parents were on their feet, their expressions carved in fury. Emily's voice finally broke the silence, soft, trembling. "Is it true?" Daniel stammered, reaching for her hands, but she pulled away like his touch burned her. It's not what it looks like." I stepped closer, my voice low, measured, precise. "It's exactly what it looks like." The whispers swelled into a storm. Guests exchanged horrified looks. Phones appeared, snapping photos, recording videos. Daniel's perfect day was slipping through his fingers, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. And I stood there calm, composed, watching the man who humiliated me drown in the very poison he once poured down my throat. For the first time in months, I breathed easily. Because this wasn't just revenge. This was justice.
The church was in chaos. Guests whispering, Emily crying, her parents glaring at Daniel with undisguised disgust. And me? I stood perfectly still, savoring it all. I had done it. I had cut him down exactly the way he cut me down. The balance had been restored. Or so I thought. Because I had forgotten one thing about Daniel. Snakes don't die easy. After the ceremony collapsed, the guests poured out in a wave of murmurs and judgment. Emily left in tears, her parents close behind, refusing to even look at Daniel. I followed the crowd outside, breathing in the crisp air like it was victory itself. But then I felt it. A hand clamping hard on my shoulder. Daniel. His face was twisted, pale with rage, eyes bloodshot like an animal cornered. "You think this is over?" he hissed, his voice low but venomous. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I turned slowly, meeting his glare with calm I didn't fully feel. "I know exactly what I've done." His jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might shatter. "You ruined my life." "No, Daniel, I just returned the favor." For a heartbeat, I thought he might hit me right there on the church steps. His fists were trembling, his chest heaving. But instead, he leaned closer, his breath hot against my ear. "This isn't over," he whispered. "I'll burn everything you love to the ground." At first, I dismissed it as empty rage, words spoken by a man whose ego had just been shattered. But I underestimated him, again. Because Daniel didn't disappear quietly. He resurfaced days later, colder, sharper,
more dangerous than before. It began with subtle things. Friends who stopped returning my calls. Colleagues at work giving me strange looks. My boss pulling me aside saying there were disturbing rumors about me circulating online. Someone had created fake accounts, posting lies about me. Accusations of theft, infidelity, violence. They spread like wildfire, poisoning every corner of my life. Daniel's work. He couldn't fix what I'd done to him, so he would dismantle me piece by piece instead. One night, I returned home to find my apartment door slightly open. Inside, drawers were ransacked, papers scattered, photos torn. Nothing of real value was taken, just my sense of safety. Pinned to my wall with a knife was one photo. Me and my ex, Sarah. Across it, scrawled in red marker, were 3 words. Payback is forever. For the first time, real fear crept in. This wasn't the smug, careless brother I had known. This was someone unhinged, desperate, dangerous. And it hit me. By taking my revenge, I hadn't ended the war. I had started it. I tried to warn my parents, but they refused to listen. "He's hurting," my mother said, wringing her hands. "You two need to stop this before it goes too far." Too far? We had passed too far months ago. Daniel wasn't just lashing out, he was escalating. And if I didn't stop him, I knew he would strike at me in ways I couldn't predict. He had already taken my wedding. He had tried to take my reputation. What would he try to take next? Late one night, as I sat in the dark, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It was a video. My stomach twisted as I hit play. The shaky footage showed Daniel holding a glass of whiskey, his smile sharp as broken glass. "You thought you could humiliate me and walk away? You don't get to win, brother. You don't get to breathe easy. You took my future, so now I'll take yours. Watch your back. Watch everyone you care about, because I'm not finished." The screen went black, and in that silence, a realization sunk in. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was war.
Revenge was supposed to satisfy me. It was supposed to end with Daniel on his knees, his lies exposed, his pride shattered. But standing in the wreckage of his wedding, watching his eyes burn with rage, I realized something terrifying. Daniel wasn't broken. He was just getting started. The weeks that followed felt like living inside a nightmare I couldn't wake from. It started with whispers at work, a missing file on my desk, a sudden anonymous complaint about my conduct. Then the whispers grew teeth. A news article appeared online, cheap, tabloid style, but plastered with my name. It accused me of fraud, theft, and even assault. None of it was true, but it spread quickly, shared and whispered, until colleagues looked at me like I was a stranger. I knew whose hand was behind it. Daniel's. He couldn't kill me outright, so he decided to strangle my life piece by piece. At night, I felt his presence, even when he wasn't there. Strange cars idling outside my apartment, footsteps echoing in the stairwell after midnight, the subtle shift of objects in my home as if someone had been inside while I was gone. He wasn't just attacking me, he was haunting me. One evening I found a package at my door. No return address. Inside was a single, charred photo of me as a child,
my arm around Daniel, both of us smiling in the sunlight of some long-forgotten summer. On the back, written in jagged letters, "Family burns the brightest." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to every creak, every whisper of wind outside my window, convinced he was out there, waiting. And then my phone buzzed. A message. No words, just a video. It was shaky footage of my parents' house, taken from the shadows, their lights glowing warmly inside, the faint outline of their figures moving past the curtains. My chest tightened. This wasn't about me anymore. He was threatening them. The next morning, I tried to confront him. I called, texted, demanded he stop dragging our family into his madness. His only reply was chilling in its simplicity. "You took my future. Now I'll take your past." I began to feel cornered, like a rat in a maze Daniel had built. Every step I took, he was ahead of me. Every move I made, he twisted. But fear has a strange effect on the human mind. It doesn't just paralyze, it sharpens. I realized something as I sat in the wreckage of my reputation, my sanity fraying. I couldn't keep defending myself. Daniel had declared war, and wars aren't won by defense alone. So I began to plan again, but this time, not for humiliation, not for exposure. This time, I would take everything. The first step was patience. I acted normal, pretending his tactics were working. I let him believe I was beaten, desperate, crumbling. But in the shadows, I started tracing him. His movements, his habits, his new life after Emily left him. And what I discovered was a crack in his armor. Daniel wasn't just lashing out. He was drowning. His business was failing. His finances were bleeding. He had enemies circling him already. All I needed to do was push. Just once. Hard enough. And the house of cards he built would collapse forever. The night I uncovered the final piece of leverage, I felt it like a spark in the dark. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about ending this war once and for all. But ending it meant stepping into a darkness even deeper than Daniel's. And for the first time, I wondered if I was ready for what that would make me.
When you declare war, you'd better be ready to play it to the end. Daniel never understood that. He thought war was chaos, violence, destruction. But real war, the kind that wins kingdoms, is silent, patient, surgical. And I had learned that lesson well. I started small, subtle, invisible. I traced his contacts, his debts, his enemies. Daniel had always lived recklessly, borrowing favors, cutting corners, making enemies in places he thought he could outrun. But enemies have long memories. All I had to do was introduce them to each other. A quiet phone call here, an anonymous tip there, a forged email that looked convincingly like Daniel betraying someone powerful. It didn't take long. His so-called friends stopped answering. His investors suddenly pulled out. A supplier he owed money to decided he'd had enough. Piece by piece, I pushed the first domino, and then I watched the rest tumble. Daniel thought he was fighting me. He thought the strange accidents, the rumors, the betrayals closing in on him were just bad luck, or worse, his own paranoia. I made sure of that.
Every time he tried to strike at me again, he stumbled. Every move he made turned to ash in his hands. The more he clawed, the faster he sank. By the time he realized the walls were closing in, it was too late. The confrontation came one night, late, when he stormed into my apartment like a man on fire. His clothes were rumpled, his face hollow with sleepless nights, his eyes red-rimmed and wild. "You're doing this, Daniel. Don't lie to me. I know it's you." I sat calmly at the table, sipping a glass of water, letting him rage. "What exactly am I doing, Daniel?" I asked softly. "My business gone. My friends vanished. Every door I knock on slams shut in my face. You think I don't see it? You're pulling the strings." He slammed his fists on the table, rattling the glass. "You're ruining me." I leaned back, meeting his furious eyes with cold silence. Then I smiled. "Ruining you? No, Daniel, you're ruining yourself. I've just given you a mirror." His breathing grew ragged. "You think you've won?" I leaned forward, voice low, almost gentle. "I already have." For the first time, I saw it. The crack in him. Not anger, not rage, but fear. Real fear. And it was beautiful. The weeks that followed were his true unraveling. His business folded. His debts surfaced. Old enemies circled like vultures, tearing at what little he had left. His name became poison, unspoken in polite company, laughed about in hushed corners. And through it all, he never had proof. Never caught me with the knife in my hand. To the world, Daniel had simply destroyed himself. But we both knew the truth. The last time I saw him, he was sitting alone in a dingy bar, a half-empty glass in front of him, staring at nothing. As I walked past, his eyes flicked up. For a moment, the fire sparked again. Rage, hatred, desperation. But then it died, smothered by something heavier. Resignation. He looked at me, and I knew he understood. He hadn't lost to chance. He hadn't lost to himself. He had lost to me. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. Not the spectacle of his ruined wedding, not the screams or the threats or even the fear, but the quiet, unshakable truth. He had been at war with me, and I had made him believe he was only at war with himself. I didn't just ruin Daniel. I erased him. If you enjoyed listening to my story, please subscribe, like, and comment. Listening to my other Betray video, and keep safe.